Joining me today, we have Juan Matute, who is the Deputy Director of the UCLA Institute of Transportation Studies, Michael Samulon, who is the Deputy Director of Electrification for the LA Mayor's Office of Energy and Sustainability, and Clinton Bench, who is Director of Fleet and Transit for UCLA Transportation. And we're going to be talking about innovation in transportation as we move towards the Olympics. So we'll start with just letting everybody introduce themselves briefly and saying kind of what their role is, and then we'll dive into Olympic conversations. So since you're here in person, why don't we start with you, Michael?
Thanks, Nurit. Good afternoon, I guess, everybody. Michael Samulon, Deputy Director, Electrification in the Mayor's Office of Energy and Sustainability. And in this role, I'm working on trying to accelerate the decarbonization of our transportation system. And that's both internally with our city fleets, which consist of close to 20,000 vehicles across 6 different fleets, and everything we're doing externally and publicly to try and get adoption moving quicker and making that easier for everyone. That includes policy, deployment of public chargers, building code, things of that nature. I'm happy to dive more into it as we get into it.
Great, thank you. And Juan.
Good afternoon. Thank you for allowing me to join remotely. I've been a bit under the weather. My name is Juan Matute. I'm the Deputy Director of the UCLA Institute of Transportation Studies. I do research on transportation technology, finance, governance, with an emphasis on public transit and passenger transportation. Happy to be here.
Thanks. And Clinton?
And good afternoon, everyone. And thank you for allowing me to join remotely as I'm out of state, but I'm very excited to be part of this discussion. Name is Clinton Bench. I use pronouns he, him, his. I'm the Deputy Director. I'm sorry, not Deputy Director, Director. Oh, gosh. Director of Fleet and Transit for UCLA Transportation. And what that means is I oversee our vehicle resources on campus. So we have about 1,000 vehicles in our UCLA vehicle fleet. And we handle everything from vehicle acquisition to in-servicing, maintenance, fueling, charging, remarketing. And of course, that also includes our Bruin bus transit service, which is one of many municipal and or institutional transit agencies serving the UCLA campus. And we also operate paratransit service as a complement to that. And very proud of the fact that about 40% of our fleet is battery electric, and we operate the most diverse electric fleet of any university in North America. So thank you for having me.
Thanks so much. And we might start with you, Clinton. As we think about the 2028 Olympics, one of the first things that comes to mind for us here at UCLA is that this feels like a very full circle moment. So a lot of UCLA's leadership with 40 years of leading in sustainable transportation really kicked off with the 1984 Olympics. And there's such a potential for legacy there. So before we look to the future to 2028, let's look to the past for a moment and think about the way that the 84 Olympics catalyzed transformation. So Clinton, maybe you can touch on that legacy here at UCLA, and then I'll hand it to Juan and Michael to talk about the city.
Sure, and I'll be brief since I was not in my role in 1984, and but I'm excited about the opportunity to have LA be on the world stage with respect to clean transportation and also potentially autonomous transportation. The UCLA has always been either on the cutting edge or the bleeding edge with respect to new technologies in transportation. We're proud to have been one of the first university fleets using propane-fueled buses, which was something we focused on back in the 80s and the 90s, shifting over to renewable natural gas, effectively having a zero-emission fleet through that approach. And then for the last 5 to 8 years, we've implemented a policy where none of our vehicles that we purchase, if there's an option in a battery electric or otherwise zero emission motive power for a vehicle, we do not purchase any internal combustion engine vehicles any longer, whether they're light duty or heavy duty. So I think I'm glad you asked the question, because I think there's an opportunity for us too to sort of remind ourselves of our commitment to clean transportation over the course of those years. I was just talking about buses, of course, but our commitment as well to being a proving ground for battery electric light duty vehicles goes back into the mid 90s as well, with some of Ford's efforts to electrify small cargo vans as well. So very proud of our history and looking forward to what we can showcase here in 28.
Thank you so much. And I know the 84 Olympics really kicked off what became an over 30-year van pool program that was the largest in the nation, and a lot of the what we call transportation demand management. Juan, I know you and I have talked, or you've studied some of the history there with City of LA's infrastructure. Do you want to share a bit about some of that legacy with the 84 Olympics?
Yeah, well, for 1984, as part of just ongoing planning for air quality and other transportation planning in Los Angeles, the city and region implemented a substantial, one of the largest at that point in time, transportation demand management program that was quite effective in not only asking people to stay home from work or work different hours and reduce non-work trips, but actually scheduling the events in ways that would avoid creating bottlenecks on the transit and freeway systems. So that was perhaps the most effective way of reducing traffic congestion during the 1984 games. What was moderately effective was a technology-based program that was new in Los Angeles at the time, called ATSAC, or the Automated Transportation Surveillance and Control System. This was introduced around downtown Los Angeles and in the corridor between downtown and Exposition Park. And it integrated cameras and something that was novel at the time, the ability to sync traffic signals based on traffic conditions. And that really helped keep vehicles moving and avoid gridlock type conditions. Some of the TDM programs have gone away, but the technology-based intelligent transportation system programs for transportation system management remain, and that system has expanded throughout the city of Los Angeles, leading to more signal synchronization and other advantages of having a smart traffic control infrastructure.
Thanks so much. I've always wanted to visit the control center. I've heard it's pretty amazing to witness. So someday to get down, it's like the basement of City Hall or somewhere like
It was in the basement, but it's moved now.
Okay, I'll have to find out the new location. But yeah,
sure.
Thank you so much for that history. I'm going to pivot to Michael. You're welcome to add more of the history if you have anything to reflect on, but let's also talk about what some of the innovations are that you see happening in transportation as we move towards LA28.
You know, I think a lot of the technology that Juan is talking about has, like he mentioned, been advancing over these last 40 years. And ATSAC probably looks pretty aged compared to a lot of the systems that are out there these days, although I've actually heard that might be a good thing because we still have a lot of hard wiring, which makes it more robust and things of that nature. I know from the vantage point of our office and the work that I'm doing, we're using this really as a organizing principle to fast forward electrification and emissions reductions. And that's sort of across the spectrum, you know, from buses and the goods movement, heavy duty area down to, you know, TNC, people movement, as it will come and be used during the games. So not so much innovation, but really using the games as an organizing and focusing lens to get everyone working and moving in the same direction. I can tell you, I've been in this role for about 10 years. And when we were awarded the Olympics, we've been pushing this, hey guys, for the Olympics, we got to do it for the Olympics, for the Olympics. And it was sort of 11 years out originally, and I was so far away. And it feels really, really, really close now. And if you know anything about large charger deployments, you know that thinking about a 2 to 3 year time horizon scares you, and you don't know if can we move 5 or 10 megawatts of power in that amount of time. So I'm actually looking forward to, with respect to innovation, seeing some sort of shared platform, shared charging that comes about because of the games. And right now, everyone kind of does their own thing. I'm sure Clinton probably sees this where, fleets say, hey, I need my own equipment, I need my own chargers, and that's the typical sort of point of view here. I see this being something where we can optimize sort of the infrastructure that is deployed and really use apps and other sort of smart communication that exists today to better utilize the infrastructure that we can deploy between now and 2028. So I'm very excited to see how we coordinate between all the municipal transit agencies in the region, which I don't know, 20 or 30 of them, plus the universities with, UCLA and USC both have big bus fleets. How do we get us all talking together? How do we use shared infrastructure? How do we optimize it so that, between venues and games, we're able to sort of best use that? So I'm looking forward to seeing 2028 be a way to help us sort of improve broadly regional interconnectivity, let's say, at least on fueling.
Yeah, absolutely. Juan, how about you? What innovations are you excited about?
Well, I always look at the fundamentals of the transportation system and the challenges that we have in moving people and goods. And those largely, from a first principles approach, are geometry and time. And so I always look for innovations that directly address one of those two, either moving more people through a finite amount of space, or changing the times that people and goods are traveling to avoid the peaking issue that leads to, combined with the geometry problem, the recurrent congestion. So I'm really looking towards anything that deploys transit priority for buses to move more people around the venues, around the city and county, as well as perhaps some of the innovations that may come in the shared ride space with information and communication technology paired with automated driving systems that can do some of the routing that's been promised through microtransit, but at a larger scale.
The availability of buses is a big issue for LA28 from what I've heard, and there will be a lot of sharing across fleets. Clinton, as someone in a fleet area with a fleet to manage, what are you excited about in terms of technology in the next few years?
Well, Michael and I sound like we have a lot of talking to do, because I'm excited about a lot of the same things he was just mentioning. Let me just throw out there, with respect to vehicle charging, it's I think especially relevant to the group that's gathered here today. Vehicle charging in the past has been very much a kind of individual venture, right? Private vehicles finding a charger, getting in line, using whatever speed of charging is available from that charger, and going on their way. When it comes to institutional fleets, it's a very different approach, and there's opportunities here through back-end charger control software, and also some of the new standard protocols that are available for pretty much all vehicle chargers that are being offered in the marketplace now, to optimize the distribution of charge between multiple vehicles that may be plugged in a particular cluster of chargers, or even across, let's say, the entire UCLA campus, which is important given that will be the site of the Olympic Village in 2028. So, for example, LADWP, we're certainly working closely with them to find ways to deliver more power into the campus to support our electric vehicle charger expansion. But we also don't want to necessarily overload the grid, charging all of our vehicles at a time when that power is needed for something else. So how can we optimize by understanding the routings of buses, of other light duty vehicles that may be acting as shuttles, or providing service for skilled trades that are doing custodial work, grounds work, technical fixes in the Olympic Village during the Olympics. How do we understand when they need to travel, what their plans are for the coming days, and how do we prioritize the distribution of charge amongst all of these vehicles that are serving the village? And then, as you say, Nurit, how do we then weave in the thousands of buses, ideally, that would be made available not only by transit agencies in Southern California, but also transit agencies throughout California and other regions coming here to support the movement of people and goods between the competition venues and the Olympic Village. So I could go on for hours talking about potential solutions, but I think this is an opportunity here in this group to sort of just throw that gauntlet out there onto the table and say, hey, how can we work together to come up with these innovative solutions?
Yeah, definitely. So, I think everyone has alluded to how much the Olympics can be a catalyst for pushing forward things that the city has been working on, the importance of collaboration across agencies, which all sounds very promising. But let's talk for a moment. What do you see as the challenges or barriers to making this happen? Like, what are the blocks right now, and what, if anything, can we do to free those up? And anyone's welcome to chime in first.
I'll jump in with a couple of thoughts. So on my ride over this morning, I was pleasantly surprised. I saw 4 FedEx electric delivery vans in the 5 or 6 miles that it took to get here, and 1 Alsco uniform delivery truck that was electric. Obviously, I saw dozens and dozens of non-electric delivery vans as well, but it was exciting to see that. And speaking to challenges, CARB, the California Resources Board, just recently withdrew a waiver that they had for their Advanced Clean Fleets rule from the EPA, given the change in federal administrations. And this has been, something that our office had been looking towards, and I'm sure a lot of others, as it is the stick that goes along with all the carrots that are out there in terms of money and finance to help companies move to zero emission vehicles. And without it, it really puts us at a disadvantage. So I'm hoping that we can still use the 2028 games as a way to encourage some of these first movers, at least, to continue forward with their electrification journey. But I do see it as, for us and for the work that I do every day, a stumbling block in our efforts, and the same loss of money that might have come from the federal government. So that's definitely a big challenge that I'm quite unhappy about. There's also related challenges that sort of fall out from that, which is public sector is still subject to it, but the OEMs now don't necessarily need to build the equipment. So there's a lot of knock-on effects with the ACF waiver being withdrawn, and it will cause challenges in the market, which all just leads to, okay, how do we clean up the air as much as we can in a world where we don't have that stick? So makes the game sort of as a unifying principle all that much more important, I think.
Yeah, definitely. Juan or Clinton have something to add on the challenges side? I know we could talk about that all day too.
Sure. And Michael's right to express serious concern about the withdrawing the request for a waiver from EPA on ACF. I'm slightly more optimistic in the sense that as we talk about coming together as an entire planet of stewards of our environment and also users of transportation vehicles, the reality is that the rest of the world is moving forward with electrification of heavy duty vehicles, especially delivery vehicles, and that thank heavens too for the leadership of our administration, state administration in California, as well as the California Resources Board in developing contractual obligations between the OEMs and our relevant regulatory agencies to ensure that they will continue to be able to provide necessary equipment for us. Now, the challenge, of course, as Michael is saying, then is too, how do we engage some of these private fleets to make the same expedient progress that would have been required if we actually had ACF in place as that stick. So I agree completely. There's a lot of policy work that we need to move through, but at the same time, do still have a good bit of optimism on that front. Let me pivot just a bit to the interesting challenge that our terrain, geography, and just setup as an institution poses for the Olympic Village that we'll be hosting. Over the last decade of Olympic villages for Summer Olympic Games, the footprint for Olympic villages and even for some of the competition venues has been a blank slate. Looking at industrial reuse areas, sort of brownfields that are being developed into housing and such. And it provided a lot more flexibility for setting up circulation routes for buses, for athletes within Olympic villages and getting them to venues. What we're faced with here, and this is a wonderful problem to have, is that we have a well-developed infrastructure here on the UCLA campus serving as the primary Olympic village that doesn't need to be rebuilt. Investment doesn't need to be made in new construction. At the same time, we may have over 10,000 athletes on the Hill, not to mention those in the Southwest campus, that need to be able to circulate within the campus and to the primary entry points for the secure areas. And we need to do that on a 2-lane road. One single 2-lane road serving the Hill is a little bit of a loop. And, what is the solution going to be in terms of shuttle operations? My hope and desire is that through a lot of the good work that we're doing in UCLA Transportation, along with the UCLA Mobility Lab, to investigate and pilot automated transportation service, as well as the desire I know that Michael's office has, and also LA28 in piloting autonomous vehicles, that we're able to come up with a great solution that would not only serve LA28 for their circulation needs, but also in the long term, connected autonomous electric vehicles operating on the UCLA campus.
Yeah, definitely. Thank you for highlighting some of that and bringing it back home to the village. I want to make sure we have some time for audience questions, so I'm going to take a couple and then I'll return to our moderated discussion. Anyone in the audience have a question? And I think there might be a mic floating around that you can use.
Hi there, good afternoon. So just to scare you, we're 3 years, 5 months, and a day from the start of LA28. Not going to talk too much about challenges, more looking at the calendar. I'm not sure if LA28 has yet released their sustainability plan publicly. I mean, a lot of efforts underway, the game executives, but just kind of checking in on what are the next kind of milestones to look for to see, if we're going to be on track for the ambitious goals that have been set.
Yeah, so before I hand it to the panel on the milestones in transportation, as far as the sustainability plan, so I'm the co-chair of the LA28 working group, and we've been engaging the city and the county and key nonprofits from around the region. And the plan is targeting publication this spring. So keep an eye out for that milestone. But as far as milestones towards actually making this all happen, I would defer to Michael or maybe Juan.
I'll take a quick try at it and defer to Juan. He may have more information, but the Games Route Network is going to be sort of the big organizing principle around how are we actually moving humans from place to place, venue to venue, from the media village, the athlete village. I had the opportunity to go to Paris during the Paralympics last summer and sort of see how it works. And first of all, it was wonderful. Everything they did was incredible. What we do will not look like what they did. Moving humans around this region is going to be totally different. And there was no way to be in Paris without knowing the games were happening. Whereas you can be in parts of LA, and I bet during the 28 games, you will have no idea that the games are happening just because of, the setup. So making the Games Route Network work the way it's supposed to, I think, is going to be really big. That's something to look out for. Juan, I'll defer to you. You may have other information.
Yeah, I mean, the precursor for the Games Route Network is certainty on all the venue locations, which is still evolving and has become a political issue in the city of Los Angeles. So I look towards having all of the venues locked down, contracts signed and approved as the key milestone in being able to do the transportation planning between them. We're going to have a lot of buses. They're going to need places to park. Venues can provide that, but then you need to make sure they can get to from venues and deadheading capacities so that they can get people around. And so that is really the key milestone that I'm looking for, that everything cascades from.
Thank you. We'll take another question from the audience. Thank you, Mike Renner.
Mike 1.
All right, thank you. Cesar Diaz here. Just quick question, I guess. Where's the funding going to come from some of these innovations, in particular for funding electric vehicle infrastructure or autonomous buses? Is that something the local agencies of government has to fund first? Or is it the organizing committee that has the funding for that and it gets reimbursed? Just curious, or, DWP's coming up with new incentives and things like that.
I'll take a stab at some of that. So everything that LA28 is looking at is just venues. So they are concerned with ensuring, power at the venues, robust backup and things of that nature. So they are not going to worry themselves about all of this ancillary, infrastructure that's going to be needed. So where is the money going to come from? I think we are at the moment where it's kind of pencils down in terms of projects, right? If you don't already have a project, an electrification project that you're thinking about, if you can get your designs and plans and a service request in sort of now, maybe you'll be okay. But if you haven't already been thinking about it and planning, it may already be too late. Then that's for big sort of hub, charging projects. Where the money is going to come from, yes, there will be DWP money. They have already invested over $130 million since 2018. Actually, that number's probably low. I haven't seen the dashboard in a few months, but they've spent tons of money. There's, of course, lots and lots of CEC and other California funds coming to help with this, but it's not going to be the government. The government will help. The government will be a support, but there's going to have to be a business model here. And I think we're seeing this realm sort of shake out a little bit with the players that have money and have deep pockets being able to make it through and continue. EVgo just got over $1 billion loan from the DOE. We'll see if it sticks. But those are the kind of things. Yeah, those are the kind of things you need to feel confident knowing I can go in, build a project which is. I mean, we're talking about retail or charging services. Your margins are very, very low. So the payback on those can take a long time depending on what goes into the project. So really, it has to be a collaboration between public funds, but ultimately, the private sector has to see a path forward, and not to beat a dead horse here, but getting back to the ACF waiver being pulled, it really, that made things less certain and made it harder to make the case for projects, or it made it so that companies are going to look for truly what's the low-hanging fruit, what are the cheap projects, things like that.
Yeah. Juan, Clinton, anything to add on funding?
Yeah, let me share a bit of good news with respect to funding for improvements on the UCLA campus. We're very excited. About 3 months ago, we were awarded a Transit and Intercity Rail Capital Programs grant from the California State Transportation Agency for a $32 million project here at UCLA that has 3 major components. One is to complete the electrification of our Bruin bus fleet so that it will be 100% electric by the time that LA28 comes around. And we're very excited about being a part of the transportation infrastructure for the games. Number 2, to implement the first in the nation on a university campus, first in California, wireless charging pilot. So we will be testing out through our vendor partner Electrion wireless charging capabilities for our Bruin buses. And that would be both for static parking and layover locations, as well as dynamic in-road charging along Westwood Plaza. And then third, and this is really a great benefit for the Olympic Games, is the construction of an intermodal transit hub at the Westwood station on the D line that will be opening here within the next 2 years. And what that will allow for is a seamless connection for folks coming out of the subway or going into the subway over to a bus transfer hub adjacent to Lot 36, for those that are familiar with the UCLA campus, along Kinross Avenue near the intersection of Gailey. And that particular hub will have wireless charging capability in each of the bus berths, as well as nearby at our transit garage. We're using an Energize grant that also is coming from the California Energy Commission, or it is coming from CEC, over $750,000 to support the full electrification of the yard with 16 heavy-duty vehicle chargers. So we are, and that's the beginning of a broader program for electrification or electric vehicle charging infrastructure on the UCLA campus. So we're excited about that progress. We're excited to have that money in hand. And again, challenge to this group: how do we optimize that infrastructure to be able to serve not only UCLA vehicles, but also vehicles that would be coming from other parts of the region? Finally, too, what are our opportunities for other creative strategies for battery storage? Temporal charging management. We are also working on a pilot that will start in June with another company called GenCell to implement a first in the nation high-speed vehicle charging microgrid that can be completely independent, partly charged, partly powered by a hydrogen fuel cell. So lots of great opportunities here for collaboration with the technology community in figuring out how to best utilize these new technologies.
Thank you so much, Clinton. That was a really great way to bring it back home here to UCLA as we envision what the campus will be like in 2028, and really think about how the university can be this anchor institution and a living laboratory for technology. You mentioned vehicle charging. One example of how that has had an impact here at UCLA is the Smart Grid Energy Research Center. Rajit Gad and his team had a major project under DOE with that school across town and Caltech, where they were looking at vehicle to grid integration. And for me, it was a really special moment with LADWP to be able to approve a commercial pilot of that program now. So, today is very much all about that, how research then moves to commercialization, then moves to policy. And that's really what it's all about here at UCLA. So we're almost out of time for this panel. But Juan, you've been engaged here for a long time and so passionate about transit in this area that you named your son Wilshire after the Wilshire subway. So as we think about 2028 and how exciting it is to have the subway come, do you have anything else to add about how all these things fit together, the charging, the electrification, the transit, multimodal, any closing remarks?
Yeah, I think things will actually get started next year with the opening of the LAX Intermodal Transit Center and the automated people mover at the airport. That's been something that people have been looking forward to for a while. Airport trips are the number one trips for using shared rides, taxis, Uber, Lyft types of vehicles now. Waymo is looking at expanding to LAX. And I think that will begin some shift in people thinking about how they get around. That will then be accelerated for the games. We're going to need a lot of buses. We're going to need even more if they're stuck in traffic. So we're going to have a very different seeming transportation system for the summer of 2028 than we have right now. And there will be kinks to work out in that system. So it's likely that a lot of the high capacity lanes are going to be rolled out earlier in the year of 2028 so that people can get used to them and so that government agencies operating the roadway network can tweak them. And so there's kind of a rolling start as I see it in the cultural changes that may be needed. And then always looking towards where technology can help make that easier. There's advances happening at the state level in technology to make it much easier to move between different uses, transportation systems. So think of single ticketing for a Waymo trip that then transfers on to the Purple Line or Wilshire West Side Subway Extension at UCLA. Like those types of things are in the works and I think could be implemented by 28. So I'm pretty optimistic about those things that are already happening or relatively low cost. Things that are expensive are going to be much, much harder. In some of the prep calls, I was thinking that the only things that can be deployed are really cloud-based at this time in terms of managing the system. And so I would look towards those types of vendors, providers, and wherever somebody's talking about V2X and 5G, that has promise for deployment by the games. There's a lot of coordination issues and figuring out what the protocols are and moving forward on those, but those can be worked through and deployed quickly. And I know that the UCLA Mobility Lab and Center of Excellence on Automated Vehicles and New Mobility are thinking about those questions.
Thanks so much. And I know there's a long history with your institute and researchers at UCLA collaborating with UCLA Transportation, which again is part of what's makes being at a university so special. We're really glad that you both have been able to join us virtually in really, I think, the best hybrid event that I've participated in. This was really seamless with the Zoom and I can see you and it's great, as well as the audience. There's just a few seconds on the clock here before we have to go to lunch. So I'm going to give the final closing remarks to Michael from the mayor's office, who is here in person. Is there anything you'd like to leave our audience with before we all mix and mingle? And Juan and Clinton, we're sorry you're not here to join us in person, but look forward to seeing you on campus when you're back in town, Clinton, and Juan when you're feeling better. Michael?
I'm probably supposed to say something about chargers and electric equipment, but I'm so jazzed by what Juan was just getting at, and I want to pitch bus lanes, which are one of my favorite relatively low-cost interventions that I think could have been and will continue to make a huge difference, and especially we now actually have the ability to automatically ticket with camera enforcement on the buses. And, you know, those big expensive infrastructure projects that really started a decade ago, like the Purple Line extension and the K Line and the people mover at the airport, those plus dedicated bus lanes just to what Juan said, really could be in effect and have us looking like a new Los Angeles by 2028. So very excited about that.
Thank you. I love that vision. Well, if we could have a round of applause for our panel. Thank you so much for your expertise.